Alrighty, everyone. Well, good afternoon, and welcome back to ConsoliDator MasterClass. Hope you guys had a good midterm break and did something fun with your extra free time. So today we are going to take a look at some Modbus applications. And so rather than focus on specific application types like level or flow or anything like that, I'm just going to go over some of the different modes that the ConsoliDator Plus can act in, because we have invented yet another Modbus mode that's pretty interesting. So we're just going to take a quick look at that, and then I'm also going to do a quick review on the demo units for the ConsoliDator Plus, because I think they're really nice, and we're getting to the point where I think a lot of you would feel comfortable being able to show them to customers and whatnot. So that being said, the other thing I wanted to mention was that last week we did have the review and makeup session on Thursday, and we got quite a few new students in the class because of that. So we do have some new folks here, and so I want to welcome them to the masterclass here, week 6. And so let's get started. So what are we going to review today? Today's key topics are going to be, we're going to take a look at some new Modbus nomenclature. So I'm not sure if any of you know this or not, but some of the terms in regard to Modbus and how we express what the field units are doing has changed. We're going to take a look at that. And like I mentioned before, we have some new Modbus modes, and that's going to make a whole lot more sense once we get into it. We're going to look at the add-on feature upgrades, which is pretty cool because you can add the Modbus capabilities to a ConsoliDator Plus. It's already out in the field. And then we're also going to take a look at using Modbus with RS-485 and Ethernet, because there's 2 different ways that we can use Modbus with this unit. So without further ado, let's take a look at our first poll. And so I'm just curious, how familiar are you with Modbus in general? Whether you use it, sell it, have learned about it, talked about it, I'm just trying to get a feel for people's familiarity with Modbus, because this is not going to be a serial communications lesson. It's not going to be a Modbus lesson. We do have webinars specifically designed towards that. And okay, it looks like we have a little bit of a mixed bag here. So it's about almost 50-50. Some folks know enough to be dangerous, and some not very familiar. I'm sort of in the enough to be dangerous category. And looks like nobody rides the bus to work, which is good. So even for the folks that are very familiar with Modbus, I think you're going to learn a few new things in this session. And especially for anyone here who has any familiarity with our legacy products like the ProView, the Modbus scanners, this is a totally different beast. So even if you are familiar with our previous Modbus units, there's going to be something new for you in this lesson. So the first thing I want to cover is some new Modbus nomenclature. So I'm not entirely sure when this took place. So basically, we used to say it was a master-slave protocol. So you'd have a master that was requesting information or giving direction to a slave unit, and the slave unit would respond and fulfill those requests. Well, now we've changed it up. So we have client and server. So the client, anytime you would use the word master previously, we're going to call it a client. And anytime that we would call it a slave previously, there's now a server. And so when these first came out, I got all sorts of confused, had no idea which one was which. And so I came up with a clever little analogy that you can use to help you remember this. So when you go to a restaurant, you being the customer, you're the client, right? You're paying them money, so you're the client. And the client places orders. And you place orders with your server. And so that's just a clever little analogy. So client being the paying customer, you're the one that tells your server what to do and what you want, and the server fulfills those requests. So hopefully that's not too confusing. I'm going to be using client and server as part of this class moving forward. So you're never going to hear master slave out of me again. Well, I might slip up a couple times, but anyways. So with that, that's just the new nomenclature. We also have some enhanced and new Modbus features. So what do I mean by that? Well, enhanced because some of these modes or features are sort of standard, but we've actually expanded on them. And we have some new Modbus features or new Modbus modes because we have this mode over here called the snooper mode. And as you can see in here, you can assign multiple addresses and customize register numbers. And that might not make a whole lot of sense right now, but I'll hopefully be able to explain what that means with another analogy. So again, these are just some enhanced and new Modbus modes that we're going to take a look at. The first one we're going to take a look at is client mode. So as a reminder, the client is the one that's requesting the information. It used to be called the master. So the ConsoliDator Plus and client mode. So basically, the ConsoliDator Plus can read and write Modbus registers to several server units. Now, the reason why I mention this is because that's what most people are going to use Modbus for with our products, is requesting information from field devices. So if you have a bunch of level sensors or flow meters out in the field, the ConsoliDator Plus can request all that information, gather it for you, and display it up on the screen there. Now, what's really nice is our old units used to do that. We did have our ProView units. Those could act as a master. They could request information. But the main difference is on the legacy products, we could only handle up to 16 Modbus registers. With the ConsoliDator Plus, we can handle up to 199 Modbus registers. So that is significant enhancement. And that's what I meant by the enhanced some of the features. And so that's basically how it works in client mode. So it can read and write. Our legacy products were not able to write. They could only read registers, and it was up to 16. So now we have 199 registers. We can read and we can write. And as we go through this, if anyone has any specific questions or anything like that, please feel free to raise your hand or shout them out in the chat box there. And so let's see, we have another poll here. Do you ever eavesdrop on people? Be honest. You're probably thinking, why is he asking this question? But I promise you there's a reason why. All right, looks like an overwhelming majority of you do, but I won't tell anyone, I promise. Come on, who doesn't eavesdrop, right? Well, so the reason why I asked you that question, it's not, it's not just me trying to be funny. It actually relates to the analogy I use to explain the next mode, Modbus mode. And this one is snooper mode. And so this, again, this is a feature that we had on our legacy products, but we expanded the capabilities with the snooper mode. Namely, it can snoop up to 199 registers instead of 16. So what does snooper mode do? Well, it pretty much eavesdrops in on the conversation between the server units and the client. So in a normal setup, this device here is making requests and asking information from each of these. And that's basically what happens. So this snooper is sitting over here, and it's listening to this conversation. It's just sitting there listening to what's going on. And so, for example, let's say you have a client, and it is requesting information from these level sensors here, right? Except to get all the information, it's asking for the level, the interface level, the pressure, and the temperature. So the client wants all that information from the servers, right? And that's what they need in the control room. But let's say you have a plant operator, and they don't necessarily need to know the pressure or the temperature of the tank. All they're concerned about is the level. Well, what you can do is you can put a snooper on the bus, and that device will be programmed to only show you the registers you want to see. So if you're that plant operator and you only care about the tank levels, the snooper is going to show you just the tank level. But the folks in the control room still get all the information they requested. And so this comes up a lot. People have asked me over the years, can I have two masters on the bus? Can I have two masters so I can look at the same information in two different places? The answer is technically no, you can't do that. That's breaking the protocol. But with the snooper, you're essentially doing that. You're able to replicate, you can have as many snoopers as you want. If you wanted to see the same information in multiple places within your plant, you can use snoopers. And so hopefully that makes sense. So again, in snooper mode, the Consolidator Plus is pretty much eavesdropping in on the conversation between the client and the server. And the good thing about it is no one else knows that it's there. Neither the client nor the servers have any idea the snooper is even listening to their conversation. And so that's quite literally why we call it snooper mode. So there we go. So that's why I asked you that funny question. And so again, snooper mode has always been a mode for our Modbus products, but again, we just took it a step further, and now we can have up to 199 registers. So just a huge advancement. I think it's a really clever mode. There are other things that go into it. So if you have any specific questions about snooper mode, feel free to either chat in or send me an email afterwards. So the next mode we're going to take a look at is brand new. And I call it, well, I didn't make up the name, but we call it snooper mode. So it sounds an awful lot like snooper, right? Well, it is kind of, but not really. This one is actually really tricky for me to explain. So if you don't understand what I'm trying to get at, that's okay. I explained it much better in the study guide. In fact, I think I explained most of these modes much better in the study guide. But here's my attempt at explaining spoofer mode. So what spoofer mode will do is it allows you to assign multiple registers and multiple addresses to one unit. So here's the story. Let's say, for example, you have a customer that is using the PLC as the client or the master, and the PLC is grabbing all of this information from here. That's how it was set up before, right? It's getting all that information. So the PLC is requesting from tank 1, and then tank 2, then tank 3, then tank 4, so on and so forth. But wait a minute. Your customer needs to replace those level sensors. They're getting a little old and beat up. They're not working as well. So they need to replace those level sensors. But those level sensors aren't made anymore, and they have to be replaced by a newer version. And unfortunately, that newer version has different register numbers. It might have a totally different function code. So what that means is if you were to replace those transmitters, well, now all of a sudden the information that the PLC is requesting is no longer there. So in order to replace those level sensors, the customer would have to go in and make changes to their PLC programming as well, which is costly and a lot of times just not worth doing. So here's what we can do. Instead of having to make changes to the PLC code, what we can do is put the consolidator in spoofer mode. And so basically, here's what happens. The unit itself has its own Modbus Modbus address and has its own internal registers. And so what we're going to do is we are going to use the register numbers and address numbers from these old sensors, and we're going to put them on the Consolidator Plus, that when the PLC requests information from one of these old devices, it's still going to get its information. It's still going to get whatever it was looking for, except it's going to be coming from the Consolidator Plus. It's not going to actually be coming from this old level sensors. And so the PLC is requesting the same register number from the same Modbus address, and it is getting the same exact information, except the information now is coming from the consolidator instead of the level sensors. And so basically we are spoofing the PLC into thinking that it's requesting information from these old level sensors, even though it's really getting the information from us. And so where this comes into play is basically if you're looking to replace older field equipment and you don't want to have to make any changes to the PLC or to whatever it is. So that is essentially what spoofer mode does. And again, I hope I explained that clearly enough. It is a little bit tricky. I did explain it much better in writing in the study guide, so you can look forward to that when I email that out afterwards. But essentially, that's what spoofer mode is. It's something that was developed here at Precision Digital by our engineers. So I don't think there's any other device, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's any other device that does this. So it's really interesting. And someone just chatted in and said register translator. I'm not sure if that is a term. I'm not familiar with the term. I'm not sure if that's a term in the industry and that's a type of product, but it's an interesting way of thinking about spoofer mode. Alrighty. So as a small recap, we looked at client mode, snooper mode, and remember the snooper is eavesdropping, and we just looked at spoofer mode. So now, how do we get all of these modes? Well, so the ConsoliDator Plus can be shipped with or without these modes unlocked. And so let's just say, for example, your customer has a ConsoliDator Plus, and 3 months later they decide, oh, geez, I really wish I could have this be a Modbus client. Well, with the ConsoliDator Plus, that is possible. So what can happen is you send us the unique ID of the device, and there's a way to go into the ConsoliDator Plus and find it. But you send us that number, I enter it into a piece of software, and I get this 4-digit code. And then I send you that, or someone here sends you that 4-digit code, you enter it in onto the ConsoliDator Plus, and then those features are unlocked. And then you can do whatever you want with them. If you bought the ConsoliDator Plus with the Modbus features already unlocked, of course, it will ship with everything already unlocked. But I just like to tell folks that for a $500 adder, any ConsoliDator Plus that was purchased after the 15th of February of this year can be upgraded in the field. And it's very, very simple to do it. The one thing I do want to mention is with server mode, or again, slave mode, the ConsoliDator Plus can operate in server mode without any additional purchases, without any codes or anything. Operating in server mode is just a normal feature of the ConsoliDator Plus. And in fact, it's a normal feature on almost all of our products. So I just wanted to add that in there, just in case there are some folks that aren't familiar with our Modbus products. And so this is our first product that ever has this type of upgrade feature where we can send you a code and it unlocks new features. So I think that's pretty slick. And we also do the exact same thing for data logging if anyone here has received data logging on the ConsoliDator. So we have another poll just to make sure that you're still with me. And I just have this is more of a trivia question. In which year was Ethernet invented? I was very, very surprised when I learned this. Let's see. Get some good answers. Come on, no one has chosen 2008? It's like the best year ever. The Dark Knight came out that year. I graduated high school. Good time. Not to date myself. But. All right, so it looks like the majority of you picked 1973, and that is true. So Ethernet was invented in 1973. And for extra credit on your final exam, someone can chat in and tell me who or which company invented Ethernet. And for extra credit, you can tell me why they invented it. Alrighty, so I asked you this question obviously for a reason. So we talked about different modes in which the ConsoliDator Plus can operate. There's a couple other things to keep in mind here. So how does this device communicate? So it communicates with Ethernet or RS-485. And so what I did here was I listed the different modes that can be used on the different, information highways, is what I call them. So if you wanted to use Ethernet, the ConsoliDator Plus can only be used as a server device on Ethernet. So that means that it can receive requests and respond to requests on Ethernet. It cannot make requests on Ethernet, so it cannot be a client with the Ethernet. Now that might sound like a disadvantage, but it's actually not, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. So on RS-45, we can do everything else. So all of the new modes that we took a look at, where we looked at client mode, spoofer mode, and all of that is done on RS-45. Server mode the Ethernet is for server mode. So now again, that might sound like a limitation, but let me explain to you why that's an important thing. So let's say, for example, that you need to replace equipment as an example. And so you have a bunch of RS-45 field units out there, and they're all coming into one device. But let's say the plant manager, they want to upgrade the control system, so they want to use Ethernet exclusively. But there's nothing wrong with your RS-45 devices out in the field, so they're not going to want to pay to upgrade them. So what they could do is they could use the ConsoliDator Plus in client mode over RS-45 to get all of the information in from the field units. Then they could use the ConsoliDator Plus in server mode over Ethernet to get all of that information back to the new control system. And so hopefully you caught on to the point that we can actually act in two different modes simultaneously and on two different sets of wires. So we can act in all of these modes simultaneously, and we can use Ethernet and RS-45 interchangeably. So that's how the device communicates. But which protocols does it support? So with Ethernet, it can support Modbus TCP/IP and Modbus UDP/IP. On 45, we have Modbus RTU, Modbus NRUN, and Modbus ASCII. Now you're going to notice that there might be a couple names in there you've never heard of, and there's two that are highlighted. So the reason why I did that is because, and this is not a blanket statement, but usually if somebody tells you I have Modbus RTU, they're usually using RS-45. Or if they tell you that they're using Modbus RS-45, they're usually using Modbus RTU. Same with the Ethernet. So if someone says they're using Modbus Ethernet or Ethernet Modbus, most of the time, or usually I should say, it's TCP/IP. And so those are the two most popular ones for those information highways. And so again, if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to chat them in. So like I mentioned before, the ConsoliDator Plus can operate in multiple modes simultaneously. So it can act as a server and a snooper and a spoofer all at the same time. And it can be done on Ethernet and RS-45 at the same time. And so the reason why I'm repeating that so many times is because that's a huge feature, a huge benefit for us. Before, with our legacy product, if you had a meter and it was in a snooper mode, that's all it could do. It could only be a snooper. You would have to either buy a new meter and change it to a different mode, or just reprogram the meter you have. We never had the ability to run in several modes simultaneously. And so that's a really big deal for us. And that's why I keep on mentioning. So that said, that's pretty much the end. But I have a couple more minutes here with you, and I wanted to go over something real quick. One of them is the ultimate learning tool, the ConsoliDator Plus demo unit. Now, on your midterm exam, you most likely saw the question, and I've asked, I think, within the polling questions I've asked about the demo unit, but I just wanted to show you that this is what it looks like. And it's the easiest way to learn and master the ConsoliDator Plus. In fact, unfortunately, I didn't have a masterclass to attend when this device was released. I literally learned this unit because it was the day I saw a prototype. One of the engineers showed it to me. It was a Friday afternoon, and I took it home on the weekend and just poked around with it. And that's how I learned this. So it really is the easiest and best way to learn this stuff. Is just to get your hands on it, you know. I highly recommend this for the second half of the class, as in starting next week. It is not mandatory at all, and you will not receive any less of an experience without one. You're still going to learn the exact same stuff, but you would get more out of it if you had a demo unit so that you could follow along with me as we're programming different objects. And a demo unit comes equipped with all of the features. So whether that's, all the Modbus stuff, the data logging, quite literally everything. It comes with everything that it can come with. Any of the latest features that we released for this device, the demo unit gets it. And for being enrolled in this class, you folks will get a 50% discount on the demo unit. So I have one more poll question for you. How many of your customers have seen this demo before? Wow, and as I suspected, the overwhelming majority is none. And that's okay, that's totally fine. I expected that, and I was, quite frankly, I was hoping that was going to be an answer. And we do have some folks here who have shown it, and it looks like at least one person has shown it to 10 plus people. And I can almost guarantee I know exactly who that person is if they're in here. That was you, John, right? Shout out to my friend John. He was definitely the one that showed it to 10 plus people. Alrighty, so the last slide I'm going to go over is, again, about the demo. So I just want to show you it's not just a demo unit. It's, do we want you to show it to customers? Yeah, duh. We're a manufacturer. Of course we do. But really, when I'm talking about the demo, it's actually more from an educational standpoint. So it comes with a fully programmed unit, and I'm actually going to show you what that looks like in 1 second. It also comes with a signal generator. So it comes with a signal generator that's being powered off of a power supply from the ConsoliDator. So you can show a customer not only the screen, but that it has a power supply. It also comes with a light horn stack, and that's actually tied into the relays so that when you're showing the demo, you can actually have a light and a horn go off. It does get annoying after a while, but it's cool to have it. USB and Ethernet cables, pretty sure you know what those are. And lastly, it all comes packaged in a nice rugged case. So just wanted to show you exactly what this is. It's not just a demo. We put a lot of time and effort into making this a really valuable tool, not just a selling tool, but for learning. And so let's take a quick look at the programming. So I mentioned that the demo unit comes fully programmed. So I'm going to show you what that means. So this is my demo unit. You've seen this 100 times already. Actually, technically, I think only like 4 times. But. So this is my demo unit, and this is our default programming. So if you were to buy a demo unit, this is how it comes programmed. So this is the first screen showing you tanks 1 through 4. This allows you to demonstrate the color coding that we've gone over before, where the water is blue, the oil is black. Our next screen is the same thing, except we're demonstrating that the colors can be anything you want. That's all the same information. The screen is exactly the same. It's showing you what it looks like without bar graphs. So if you wanted to show somebody a level display, but they don't like bar graphs for whatever reason, then you can show them this. And I'm not going to go over every single screen. We just want to give you an idea of what this is programmed to do right out of the box. We got our duplex pump controller. We've all seen that one, right? That one even has like the pump status there. lift station controller, flow readings. Here's the, the flow in total, the color coding of the flow rates and the totals. We've gone over that before, right? Gas detection. And actually, we're demonstrating a timer, actually. So what happens is when we're in an alarm mode here, this timer will count up in minutes. And I can also reset the timer there. And we got the enunciator panel, the 5-zone bar graphs. So the one I showed you in class was just a 1-bar graph, but it looks kind of cool when you have them all lighting up there. And so that's it. That's how the demo comes pre-programmed. So if you're interested in showing one and getting your hands on one to learn more about it, just let me know. We can work something out. If you can't cut a PO, we'll work something out. The point is, if you want to learn more about the unit, I will make it happen for you. And now it's time for some questions. So it's 4:30. You folks are free to go. You can leave. My feelings will not be hurt. Or I have some questions. I'm going to be answering them for the next few minutes, so feel free to stick around. The first question is, in snooper mode, can a user interact with alarms, or is it view on? That's a really great question. And let me think about that for a second. When you say interact with alarms, I'm assuming you mean being able to acknowledge them. And I think the answer is yes, but I'm going to have to write that down and get back to you on that one. Because I don't know 100% if that's true. I'd imagine it is, but I'm just writing that down. Okay, let's see. How much is the demo unit discounted price? So let me do some math on my phone real quick. So the list price is $3,670. So for being in this class, you get a 50% discount. So that would come to $1,835. Someone asked, if you reset the total on the snooper unit, does it reset on client device? So there's a way. There is a way to do that. So we have Modbus outputs and inputs. There is a way to do that. It's not going to be like an automatic thing. We'd have to set it up. But yes, you could do that. I can make it so that when we reset the total, like for example, let's say for example, I reset the total on my device. I can have it so that when the total resets, it sends a Modbus command. So yes, we could do that. With digital I/O, I mean, if you wanted to reset the total with a digital I/O, yeah, sure. And someone had commented on the snooper being able to acknowledge alarms. They said they would expect not since we're in receiver mode only. I agree with that, but the alarm itself can actually be programmed on the unit. So if you wanted to reset, and you know what I mean, like you could set up the alarm on the ConsoliDator Plus, and so that when it does go into alarm, you can acknowledge it from there. But if you're talking about sending just an alarm message, maybe not. But again, I'd have to test it out. And there were a few people that chatted in about the whole Ethernet thing. So as we mentioned, it was invented in 1973, and it was invented by Xerox. And I forget the exact reason, but it had to do with something about they had to be able to communicate with devices internal to the building or something like that. And there were no protocols available that could communicate with like a printer and a computer or something like that. It had to do with being they invented it for internal use, and then it became wildly popular. So, all right, folks. Well, that's all the questions I have. It looks like if you have any more, or again, if I didn't explain anything clearly enough, here. I apologize. I did do a much better job on these study guides, just simply because I personally am better at expressing myself through written words. So if you look at the study guide, that will have a much, much more thorough explanation of the different modes and how they're used. Lastly, the other thing that's going to be included on the email that I'm going to send out afterwards is a list of all of the videos that have been recorded. So when I did the review session, there were a lot of folks that were asking where they could see the videos from previous sessions. And so I compiled them into a Word doc, and so they're hyperlinks, and you can just click on the hyperlink and watch the video of a recorded session. So with that, you folks are free to go. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and we will convene again on Monday afternoon, where we are going to start looking at only the software and how these devices are actually programmed. So again, appreciate your attention, and we'll see you in the week.